I was so excited about that well. It had rained that day. I dropped my family off, kept my Sunday church clothes on, couldn't stand it, had to get out there. It's raining, finally get out on location. I knew I was going to have to jump the fence, but the gate was open. So I went in there. That well, they had all of the meters shut down. They had all the gauges shut down. They didn't want anybody to see the pressures, and they didn't want to see how much gas it was making, so they shut all of that off. But I could hear it, and it was singing, and I had heard enough wells. I knew that was a great well, and that's when the world changed as far as I was concerned.
Larry, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How did you kind of get into the oil business?
Well, when I graduated, I was going to go to graduate school at Colorado School of Mines. And Chip Grote, who was the head of the Bureau of Economic Geology at that time at UT, had written me a recommendation, and I got it accepted. Then I'm about to leave, and I get a phone call from him on a Saturday morning that said, "Larry, there's a job that has opened up here in Austin, and I'm recommending you for the job." And I said, "Well, you just wrote me this thing, and I'm planning on going to graduate school." And he said something that's not typical of professors. He said, "You're going to learn more on this job than you do in graduate school." And so I took the job, but it was very unique. At the time, they were building all these nuclear power plants, and they didn't have enough uranium for the plants. And so my job was to do subsurface mapping along the Gulf Coast, because Texas was the third largest producer of uranium at that time. And we had a contract with the Atomic Energy Commission. It was a government thing. And so I did a lot of subsurface mapping in the Gulf Coast. I really understood that real well. But the Railroad Commission used to be right next to the governor's home, right there on, what street was that? That was Colorado, I think.
Okay.
And there were always guys, and I would go up there to get well logs and scout tickets and that type of thing, because they had them all on file there at the Railroad Commission, and it was just up the street. So I'd go in there, and there were all these oil and gas guys in there. And so it just got me going in that direction. And I decided I wanted to really get in the oil and gas business. So I did the uranium research for 3 years.
Okay.
And then I found a guy in Dallas that since I wanted to learn the engineering side, the drilling and completion side, he had a bunch of wells to drill in the San Juan Basin. And I spent 3 years working there in the San Juan Basin, getting my education from people who, most of them didn't have a high school degree. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I learned most of the oil business. And so I was drilling and completing wells there. So that's kind of how that happened.
So you're back up in Dallas, you're drilling and completing.
I'm in the San Juan Basin, near Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay.
Yes. And that's where I am.
Do we still mine uranium in Texas, or is that over?
No, not really. Not that I'm aware of. Conoco used to have a big deposit down there in Karnes City, and but not that I'm aware of. But I do have a lot of my old maps. I've had thoughts about maybe buying some minerals, in certain areas. So,
all right, let's go to north. I guess we'd call it north of Fort Worth.
Yes,
George Mitchell had entered the game. Where were you at in your career and starting to observe that unfolding?
Well, George Mitchell was looking for new production. And so because their gas reserves were going down and down and down, their production.
And this was all up where?
This is all in the Fort Worth Basin.
Okay.
Which multiple counties. They had about 500,000 barrels, 500,000 acres held by production.
And what year is this generally?
Well, he started in the 50s, but he didn't do his first Barnett well until 1981.
1981. Okay.
Had it early.
Okay.
And he had a great team. Dan Stewart, Nick Steinsberger, Kent Valker, Black Shales guy. And so they were trying to get, they knew there was gas in the Barnett, but it was real tight rock. And the economics were not very good at all. But he had to keep more and more gas going through the pipeline because all that gas was going to Chicago. And he had to keep X amount of gas going through the pipeline in order for him to get a really good price, because they got a better price than we did, just because he had this pipeline connection. And so that started in 81, and I think he drilled 350 wells or something like that, vertical wells, and they were all kind of marginal. They weren't really good. But I was watching it. And the thing about the Barnett Shale that is so unique, it's an organic, rich rock, and it is loaded with gas. It's just real tight. And so people had tried to perforate it and make it work, and really didn't. Things changed in they were doing frac jobs that using gel at the time, and they were very, very expensive, and used a lot of chemicals. The service companies loved selling. They were making a ton of money. But Nick Steinsberger had come up with this idea. They were doing these slick water fracs in the Cotton Valley in East Texas, and he took one of the wells, the number one Slay, that had been perforated already and fracked in the Barnett with a gel frac. And he refracked it using slick water, and all of a sudden it made a non-productive well into a really good well. And that kind of kicked it off right there. About that same time, the price of natural gas was going up. Okay.
Yep.
So the slick water fracs were a lot cheaper than the gel fracs. Those were very expensive. It was a lot cheaper, about half cost.
Yep.
And so when you got a price going up and you got a completion cost that's half, it changes all the economics. And so the Barnett covers such a big area, 17 or 19 counties, something like that. And so there's even a play out in West Texas in the Barnett. Okay, way out west.
Yeah.
And so, but at that time, it would seem to me at the time that, it was a perfect situation where you have a place where you can't ever miss the target. It's everywhere. Every time you drill a well, it's going to be there.
Yep.
It's just how can you make it economic, and how can you make money out of this deal?
Yep.
And so most of the vertical wells were okay, but they weren't great. And so things changed when George Mitchell sold out to Devon.
And what year was that?
2001, I believe, or 2002.
And so just really quick.
Yes.
In 1981, he realizes we need to make more oil on this property.
Gas.
We need more gas.
Yeah.
So he tries over 300 times to do some type of vertical frac,
yes,
over 300 wells to test it. Nick comes in 99-ish with a slick water frac, and all of a sudden light bulbs go off.
Right.
Okay. So George probably continues that process for a few years, and then Devin comes to the table in 2001, 2, and says, "We'll buy you out."
Takes them out.
Okay.
And so they in 2020. No, excuse me, 2001. Let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
If I can.
Well, we'll keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
I think this is a back and forth story.
Because about that time we were still drilling vertical wells.
And were you with Dick and Hunter yet?
At this time I had been doing kind of consulting work for him, and I was drilling wells in Jack County and places like that.
Yeah.
For them. And, I was not really an employee. I was more like a consultant. Okay. But I tried to get them interested in the Barnett, because to me, it looked like we were standing on the best thing in the world. And, at the time we just didn't know how to get the gas out.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, so let me think. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. I'm trying to get my timing down on that thing.
There's a lot that happened.
So getting back to where I was, we had the Barnett Shale Symposium.
Yep.
What was happening was we had a tornado that came through Fort Worth in the year 2000.
Okay.
And in March, and all the oil companies were moving out of Fort Worth, Union Pacific and all of that. Then all of a sudden we get this tornado. We had an oil library, and I'm chairman of the board of that library at that time. And they were in the Malik Tower, got hit. We're wondering how we can keep the doors open, and suggest that we have a Barnett Shale Symposium. And so there were a bunch of us sitting around, agreed that we wanted to do it. Some didn't want to do it. But we had the Barnett Shale Symposium in the old Petroleum Club, or not the old one, it's still there, the Petroleum Club. And in 2000, and we thought maybe we might have 35 or 40 people there. And come to find out, we had such a big crowd, the fire marshals shut it down and wouldn't allow anybody else in. We had companies like Texaco and Shell and Exxon that were there. And I was kind of emceeing the thing. And I couldn't get George to allow anybody to talk from his company about it. So I was getting people from the government and people who had done slick water fracs and all this kind of stuff to talk. And that really launched, I think, a lot of people and made them take a different look at what was going on in the Barnett Shale.
Okay.
And so I made it at that time, Hunter and Dick were interested in me becoming a partner with them. And so went up to the Fort Worth Club, made a deal with Hunter up there. And
it was some elaborate long legal contract.
No, it wasn't. It was just 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and we wrote the deal down and never looked at it again.
Yep.
And so anyway, they were great partners, and super partners. And I've learned a lot from them. Okay, a lot. They were like mentors to me too. Hunter's like my big brother, really.
Yep.
And so that really launched things in the Barnett.
So you partnered with them.
Yes.
And George had made some public comment, was basically like, this is only going to work up north.
That's correct.
What happened?
So what happened was in all the vertical wells, they thought that there was an area in southeast Wise County, southwest Denton County, and the very top part of Tarrant County that was the only thing that was going to be good. because you needed to have, the thought was at that time, you had to have a barrier above the Barnett Shale, which is called the Marble Falls, and one below it called the Viola, which were solid, hard rock to confine the frack jobs to the Barnett.
Yep.
And if you didn't have that, it was going to go, the frack was going to go up or it was going to go down, and all you're going to get is water. You're not going to really frack the Barnett.
Right.
And so that was their thought, and they were trying to confine it to this. All the time they're going out beyond that barrier and buying leases.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we started buying leases also along where they were. But anyway, this is what really kind of set it off. That symposium really lit the fire under a lot of people.
Okay, so let's go back to 2002. So George Mitchell sells to Devon.
Yes.
And then you said the game changed again. What happened?
Horizontal well. Okay. Horizontal wells. And they had permitted 7 wells. 4 of them were in the area where the happy hunting grounds were, where you had the barriers above and below, and 3 of them were outside of that. Okay. And so they made really good wells on the ones that were in the sweet spot. But that's the one we were interested in, was the ones that were outside. And there was a well around Boyd in southern Wise County that was beyond the barriers. And that's the one where on a Sunday, I'd taken my family to church.
Is this the number 2 Harrison?
The number 2 Harrison. And, I was so excited about that well. It had rained that day. I dropped my family off, kept my Sunday go to church clothes on. Couldn't stand it. Had to get out there. It's raining. Finally get out on location. I knew I was going to have to jump the fence, but the gate was open. So I went in there, and that well, they had all of the valves off. I mean, they had all of the meters shut down. They had all the gauges shut down. They didn't want anybody to see the pressures, and they didn't want to see how much gas it was making. So they shut all of that off. But I could hear it, and it was singing, and I had heard enough wells. I knew that was a great well, and that's when the world changed as far as I was concerned.
Really?
Because now we could go beyond these barriers, and the Barnett could, so much of Johnson County and so much of Tarrant County and so much of Wise County did not have these barriers. And that's when things started to blow up, because there was one well. The Boyd well was really good. There was another one down by Cleaver that was a good well. And then there was one it was either in Parker County or Hood. I can't remember. And it was not a really good well. So you made good wells out of, 6 of them out of 7 wells that were drilled. So, and 2 of those were beyond the barriers. So
from a geology standpoint, why were those wells so good if they didn't have the limestone on top and bottom?
Well, because when you're drilling a horizontal well, okay, you're drilling where we're sitting right now. Yep. The Barnett's about 350 foot thick. Okay. If you can drill a horizontal well, if you can drill a horizontal
football field,
huh?
It's about a football field thick.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like some of the buildings downtown.
Yep.
And so, but when you're drilling a horizontal well, okay, you have to make a curve, but you can drill 1 mile out, 2 miles out, and all of a sudden you're exposed to 10,000 feet instead of 350 feet. Okay. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to frack as close to that well bore as you can. Okay. Because there's so much gas there.
Yep.
And so you don't get this frack going up and down. Now they do frack jobs that are, 30 stages. Back then we were doing 1 or 2 stages, and the technology is just really advanced remarkably.
Okay. So your folks get dropped off. You go out and in your Sunday's best out to the Harrison number 2.
Yeah.
The world changed before your eyes that day.
That's correct.
What did you do in the next, I don't know, 24 hours or the next week? You probably called Dick and Hunter and said, we got something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we knew immediately that it was, and we believed that it was going to be good before, but that was proof.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. The proof's now out.
Yeah. So the proof's now out. Yeah. The horizontal is the way to go. Okay.
Then what did you do?
Well, then you've got to have a change in fleets of your rigs.
Yep.
Because you got rigs that are only drilling to 7,000 feet. Now you need some that are going to go to 15,000 feet. Okay. So it takes a while. You got to change out these rigs.
Yep.
And so that change happened. Although we did some horizontal wells with rigs, we had no business drilling horizontal wells then. And it was quite a change and a big technology change because you were having to steer these wells in certain zones that you thought were best in the Barnett.
Yep. Okay. Then you partnered with Sinclair.
We partnered with Sinclair. Yes.
So what year do you, again, I'm following kind of a timeline, but did you partner with Sinclair before you knew about that Devon well, or did that come afterwards?
That was about the same time.
And you told Sinclair, hey,
Sinclair came to us.
Okay.
Marty Searcy.
Shout out to Marty.
Shout out to Marty. It was a good friend with Ross Matthews, who was part of Sinclair and now is running it. And he was a ex-Union Pacific guy also, like Marty was.
Yep.
And he's the one that got us together.
Okay.
With them. And they had a balance sheet that was really, really nice. And we knew the prices were going to go up dramatically. And they did. And so they were a really good partner for us. And very supportive. So because what happened was now all of a sudden the cost of acreage was starting to go up. And I know it jumped from about $500 an acre at one time to $3,000 immediately. In order to compete, we had to have a partner like Sinclair.
Yep.
So,
and what were the marching orders once the partnership was made?
The marching orders. Well, just get out there and start drilling wells. Now we only used we only had 10 people at the max in our office. We had 150 landmen that were out, getting leases for us.
Yeah.
But in the office at the maximum amount, there was 10 and 4 of those were the partners.
Yeah.
So it was a little bitty outfit.
But you told the landmen, go up and start leasing.
Start leasing. Oh yeah.
Here's the box.
Yes.
And was that Hazlitt? Was that
that was area? Actually it was part of Hazlitt, and then it was later on there were a lot more people added.
You're right.
And especially when we went down to the south part of Tarrant County and upper part of Johnson County, and we just had a lot of people out there. And you need a lot of people when you've got small leases.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think at one time we had up to 16,000 leases.
Did the city of Fort Worth, did they adjust pretty quickly to what was going on?
Mike Moncrief was the mayor at that time.
Yeah.
And he had put together certain groups.
Yeah.
And because they had to have an ordinance at the time, there were no wells drilled in Fort Worth. There was no pipelines.
Right.
In Tarrant County.
Yeah.
And so, most of the people, a lot of the people, whenever they'd buy a house, they owned the minerals and didn't know it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there was no production there.
Oh.
And so that was helpful in getting leases, that so many of the people owned their own minerals. But the city, there's about 35 or 37 little towns in Tarrant County. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And each one of them had to have an ordinance.
Wow.
So there was a lot of time spent at city council meetings trying to get ordinances for those little entities.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a lot of politics, political stuff
Yep.
in this. And there were pushback by a lot of people. But we were leasing under churches, schools, highways, drilling pipelines underneath 820 and all that kind of stuff. I mean, amazing stuff. Drilled wells under All Saints High School.
Really?
Yeah. Or
Shady Oaks, Colonial.
Just all over the place.
Yeah.
Just all over this place. There's been almost 19,000 wells drilled in the Barnett here. Now, if you look around the city, you would never think that.
Yep.
Okay. But there's been tremendous. All the lakes have been drilled under. It's amazing what kind of revenue it generated.
And there's still a lot of resource.
There's still
there.
a lot
Just
of
gas
resource
prices
there.
have
The
been
only
down for so long.
Only problem is the culture, and that is there's so many people moving in here. And there's so much, construction going on.
Yep.
It's harder to operate.
Yep.
Okay, in an area like this,
And what was most important back then? It was obviously getting the leases, but y'all had to figure out, were the ordinances mainly around how to get drill sites in the middle of the city?
Yeah, What are going to be the rules?
Yeah.
Another problem was noise.
Yeah.
And so, if you'll look around a lot of these well sites, it'll have big pads around it, big, huge pads, and because it was loud and when you're fracking wells and you're drilling and stuff like that, and you're right by houses. One of the members of the group went out to California and where they were doing making movies, and they were building sets. And Larry Dale was the guy's name. He went out and did this, and kind of convinced some of those people that there's a business model here for sound, to deter sound.
Yeah.
Because, when you're, a lot of what they would be doing there in Hollywood is they'd be making a movie over here and they would be building a set over here.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd had to have silence between them. And so they brought that technology here, and you'll see it all over the country now, Colorado, all over the country, really.
They're those big, tall
mats.
Yep.
And I used to take students out there on field trips, get on one side of the mat when they've got a frac job going on, and you get on the other side of the mat and you can hardly hear it.
Okay. So in 2004-ish, you made your first sale.
We agreed on a sale, didn't get it closed until 2005.
Okay. And that was XTO.
XTO.
And that was up in the Hazlet area.
That was in the Hazlet area.
And then round number 2 down in South Fort Worth.
South Fort Worth.
And what brought you down there?
There was we got word that there was going to be a pipeline that used to be a gasoline pipeline that ran along I-35.
Yeah.
Got word that somebody was buying that, and they were going to convert it to a natural gas pipeline. So we started buying along that.
Yep.
Okay. And in that area. So we went down there in southern Tarrant and northern Johnson County and started buying leases, put together about 36,000 acres. And so we started drilling. And what we would do we would drill wells far apart, and then we'd bring pipelines to each one of those wells so that there'd be lots of acreage in between where somebody could just go in and infill it.
Yep.
Because, we were going to make an exit.
Yeah.
Okay. And we wanted to put it in a nice little box with Christmas decorations all over it, and then give it to somebody and they could develop it. Because in order to do that kind of development, you've got to have a lot of people. And we didn't have enough people. And we also knew that they were starting to do things up in other areas, and like the Marcellus, and they were finding gas in Arkansas and other places. And sooner or later, that we were going to have a crash in the price of gas, which did happen.
How tight was that window? So when did you start South Fort Worth into sales? Are we talking like 2 or 3 year?
Oh no, we were off maybe. We probably were off about another month, and then we jumped down there.
Oh yeah,
and did it.
Well, no, but I'm saying from the time you took your first lease in South Fort Worth to the time you exited, how long was that period? 2 or 3 years?
Yes. Well, we exited. Let me see. We closed the deal with Chesapeake.
Yeah. Well, you said you put a Christmas thing together. So Aubrey, aka Santa Claus, came to town.
That's right. He did. Aubrey McClendon.
And that was an interesting
And he had
deal.
to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also had production along the Trinity River going east.
Okay.
And we had acreage there. And so we were always afraid the price was getting really high.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we were able to make a sale in 2007. And then we started again. Okay. So we were in North Tarrant County, we were in South Tarrant County in Johnson, and then jumped into the middle part of town around TCU and Colonial and all of that area. And we put together about 9,000 acres, plus or minus, and sold it again to Chesapeake without drilling a well this time. But so those were pretty good hits.
And then your fourth was in Parker with Denbury.
Yes, we had we put together a pretty large acreage position in Parker County, but we weren't the operators. We turned that to Denbury.
Okay.
And first they were just drilling vertical wells, and they weren't. We had a carry for 10 wells.
Right.
And they drilled 10 wells, and they weren't very good. And we were supposed to pay our own way, and so. Because we wanted them to drill horizontal wells. And so we made a trade, and we backed down our interest, and we had 5 well tranches. And when those 5 well tranches came in, then and paid for themselves, then we would back in for our interest. And we eventually sold that to Intervest. So did Denbury. Denbury sold out to them, and then we were able to sell out to them on the same terms.
Were you nervous throughout any of these?
Yes, especially the first one.
What was
the second one. Those two. The first one, I mean, when this was the first chance to make some real money.
Yeah.
And so it was going to be great for my family. My wife had stuck with me the whole time, even the ups and downs, and was just great about it. And it was just a relief and tired also, because you're doing a lot of work. And you're just afraid that it's not going to close. It's not going to get done. You've made the deal, but these things sometimes take 5 or 6 months to close. And so, yeah, it was a nervous time.
Do you remember what you did the day you closed?
It was just heavenly. It was really good. But at the same time, I didn't know what the tax consequences were going to be. I found that out too. So anyway.
Real quick, let's just take a sidebar. So We've talked about the Barnett. We've talked about what was kind of the miracle. Did you think at any point, because it kind of ended abruptly, like I'd imagine after that fourth sale of y'all's, there was a period of 10 years where nothing really happened again.
It was a lot of those companies that came in, Chesapeake and a lot of others that came in there, really kind of lost their shirt because the price took a crash.
Yeah.
When we sold out, it was $8, $9 an MCF.
Yeah.
What today it's $1.70 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it took a crash. Okay. And we were lucky to get out when we did. Others were lucky to get out when they did.
Yeah.
Saw it coming.
Yep.
We knew there was a lot of gas coming from Marsalis and other plays.
Yeah.
And so that's why we were anxious to sell what we did.
So you got to witness, a modern day miracle when you saw the number 2 Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking earlier, producing all this natural gas out of the Haynesville, out of the Marcellus, out of the Barnett. And then I said, I think I asked you earlier, I'm like, well, what keeps you up at night or something? You just said the biggest threat to the U.S. is our grid going down.
That is correct.
From your perspective, just for somebody listening, is like, what role does natural gas play in the world? It's kind of been beaten down as this evil thing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it feeds the world.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
You make ammonia out of natural gas. It's the cheapest way to make ammonia. Ammonia is used to make fertilizer.
Yeah.
And that's what feeds the world. When you got 8 billion people in the world and you go into 10, okay, you need a lot of fertilizer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can do it with renewables, but it's way more expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 or 5 times more expensive to do it with that. And you're mixing the hydrogen with nitrogen to make ammonia.
Yep.
So you knock that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's important.
What are you going to do? Starve most of the people?
Yeah.
Then, we're building all these data centers and going to EVs. You're going to need twice the grid that we've got now. Okay. Are we going to be able to do that by 2050? I don't think so.
Yep.
And people have no idea all the other products that are made from oil and from gas.
So like when you just turn on your light in the morning, there's something behind all that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. It's a lot of people just think that electricity comes from that plug in the wall, but they don't have any idea what's behind that.
Right.
And there's a lot going on.
So if natural gas was choked out or they stopped producing as much of it or the government got really radical, the grid goes down, then what?
You're done. You're done. That's what it is. You're done.
Yeah.
And I just think it's very dangerous, the path that we're taking right now.
How do we get young people excited about the energy and change the narrative?
Here's the thing. There's a lot of young people that don't want to get in there. Okay. Yeah. And there's never been a better opportunity than there is right now to get in the oil and gas business and any energy business, really. And what we're suffering from right now is a lack of talent. I think the average geologist is, 55, 60 years old. Okay. You're going to lose them. And we don't have that next generation coming in. And same way with petroleum engineers. And, we're just suffering from talent.
Yep.
And we need them. We need them back. And the thing is for them the people need to realize that we're not destroying the planet and that you're actually doing good things when you're feeding the world. And, everybody likes to drive on tires. Well, 60% of that tire is petroleum. You like to drive on asphalt roads. There's thousands of products that come from oil and gas that would be eliminated.
Basically anything.
Where are you going to get it? I mean, you don't get these products from a wind turbine.
Right.
And, there's so much. You're using a lot of fossil fuels to just build those wind turbines.
Right. Well, and they're producing it in other areas of the world. We might as well produce it in America where it's clean and safe.
Well, it's not as if the CO2 just goes up over
America,
Fort Worth or America or something. When China is building, a new coal plant every week.
Yeah.
And they're tying up all these reserves in coal. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think India's going to do? They've got the 5th largest coal reserves in the world. They're going to use it.
So you're telling me when California tells their citizens not to turn on their gas stove, that's not counteracting the coal plant that's being built every week in China?
That's right. You ask most people what is the makeup of the atmosphere? What would you think the atmosphere is, the makeup of it? How much is nitrogen? How much is oxygen? How much of it is CO2? And the answer is 78% of it is nitrogen, 21% of it is oxygen, and 0.4 of 1% is CO2. It's just a little bit. Now, I'm not saying we don't contribute to climate change. I think that we do have an impact on it, but we're not all of it. We've been coming out of an ice age for 13,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're still coming out of it.
Yeah.
We're contributing to it, but humans can adapt. I would recommend a book by Vaclav Smil called How the World Really Works. I mean, he talks in there about, there's 58,000 ships, merchant ships on the ocean at any one time. They're not going to use batteries.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how we get all of our stuff. It's by trade. And that's how we get it.
And we talk about developing countries. The greatest thing America has is cheap affordable energy.
Oh, no question about it.
But if you go to other areas of the world, they're not going to go from nothing to Teslas.
In the 1970s, gas got up to $4.25. Okay. That's in 1970s dollars. Today, what is it? $1.72.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
People in the United States don't realize how lucky they are.
Yeah.
I mean, really, for manufacturing, when Europe is paying, 4 or 5 times higher, they just can't even compete. That's why they're losing their manufacturing.
Yep. You were in the oil and gas business. You still are. The Barnett was one of the most prolific stories, the gold rush that was the Barnett.
Right.
And now you're kind of spending this part of your career in investing in technology that services the oil and gas industry.
Yes.
What's kind of the thought around that?
Yeah. In 2016, I met Ryan Vincent at the Fort Worth Club. And became friends. And he had started a technology company called Mineralware. And they were needing a little capital. And he had a little bitty office over there in the oil and gas building, and I think one employee, which was Ben Heinzelman. And so we went over and looked at it. My daughter and I, Skylar, who is now working in our family office and doing a great job. They wanted to sell a little bitty equity interest in it to get a little money. And so we did that. And we put our finger our foot in the water. And then I went with Ryan and Ben on 1 or 2 client shows and saw the way that they responded to that. And I got to learn more about the technology. And I thought, man, this thing is really going to go. And so we went back to Ryan and said, look, we would, you don't want to be undercapitalized at all. And so we want to put X amount of dollars into this company, but we want X amount of equity in the company. And we haggled around quite a bit, but we got it done. And so we started Mineralware, or he had already started Mineralware, but this really gave them some support that they really needed. And, we've been partners ever since.
Yeah.
We're not high maintenance. When not something needs to get done, we just have a conversation about it. It gets done. And so that was a real successful business for us. And we were in the Fort Worth Club. It was, for managing minerals. And we got it to a certain point. And what we learned from our clients was other products that they wanted. They wanted to be able to trade, mineral interests. Okay. And so that's where the idea for energy domain came in. Okay. And we were gathering a tremendous amount of data. And so Energy Domain was a marketplace, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We sold out Mineralware to SS&C in, I think, 2022. Bigger company. And we wanted to concentrate on Energy Domain and another company called Energy Freelance that we changed the name here lately to Energy Hire. And so anyway, these technologies, they're just efficiency tools is what they are. And we essentially put up the money to build platform to get it started and kicked off. And then as it looks like it's going to work, then we go out and raise more capital to build, business development teams and things like that. So, right now we have 3 of them going. We sold 1 and we've got 2. Energy Domain, which Ben Heinzelman is now the CEO, and Energy Freelance. Energy Hire now, since we changed the name. And Mike McComb, who used to work for Parsley, is running that down in Austin. Okay.
And Energy Hire is using AI, or
it's using AI.
Yeah.
For and so there's a lot of companies that spend a tremendous amount of money on hiring, and using AI, we can really make better matches. And so it's, we're still in the beta phase of that. We had the idea a long time ago.
Yeah.
But when we were going forward with Energy Domain, we found out we needed to have a broker's dealer's license.
Yep.
And it was during the pandemic. Okay. And it took 1.5 years or so to get that. So it really set it back.
Yep.
We were going to launch it earlier. It's a good thing we didn't, because we were able to make it a lot better product. But when I say we, I mean they. Okay. And so anyway, that thing's really taken off now. And we're about to launch at Energy Domain our data product.
So you're just having a blast.
So yeah, this is going to be really good. This will really launch us, and but we're growing.
Yeah.
Started off with just trading minerals, and then it went to non-ops. Now it's in ops. Okay, and we've got hopefully pretty soon we've got a guy out of Denver, Chris Robinson, that may take over for. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but for Ben Heinzelman, so Ben can concentrate on the data side.
Yep.
So anyway, those are going well.
All right. Well, if you had to make a prediction for the next 10 years, you think we'll continue to see, you got to see the first revolutionary, maybe not the first, but you got to see fracking and horizontal fracking and got to see how that changed the world.
Yes.
Is that something you think, if you were a betting man, that will happen again? Maybe not in the next 10 years, but going forward, we'll continue to find ways to get more oil out of the ground cheaper.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
The technology is getting more and more efficient all the time. And they got drilling rigs now that can drill without a human being on location.
Yep.
And that's probably coming.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's so much more left.
Yep.
Anywhere a shale is a source rock.
Right.
Okay. Then you have reservoir rock.
Yep.
So wherever you have production, it's being sourced from something.
Right.
If you find that source, usually it's a shale, sometimes it's limestone. There's a lot of hydrocarbons there. We haven't even touched it. Okay, we have not touched it. And if you look at a map of the world where oil fields are and gas fields, most of them are not in shales. This miracle has happened in the United States.
Yeah.
It's not happening in Russia
or
China or in in the Saudi Arabia. It happens here. Okay. And the reason we've been so successful is because of private ownership of minerals. Okay.
Why?
Because there's a lot more competition for acreage.
Yeah.
If you have 20 companies, 30 companies that are in the Barnett or in the Haynesville or Marcellus, they're always improving the technology.
Yeah.
You got Exxon over here that's got 5 million acres, and there's only one company out there. These improvements don't always come from great engineering.
Right.
Sometimes they come from trial and error.
Yep.
And things really advanced here quickly, really quick. And it's amazing. It's been a miracle, really. And it's going to get better.
Yep.
It's going to get better. If they'll let us get it better. Okay.
Yeah. You think they will?
Yes. And the reason I think they will is because people can't stand to live without it.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yep.
That's what our family's betting on.
Yeah.
People cannot stand to live without it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, all they have to do is have a week or two with no grid.
And they'll
find out real quick.
They like oil and gas.
That's right.
Larry, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you.